Hey guys, welcome to BP, the Bible Perspective. I want to address a subject matter. I'm calling this, we are God's models, so give them something to see. Now, before we get into our lesson, don't forget to hit like and subscribe and hit the notification bell for any upcoming videos and teachings we will be sharing. Now, this subject matter, we are God's models, so give them something to see, came out of the current issues of Americanism, patriotism, and Christianity. What we see today among American Christians, and how they respond, how they act, and in some cases, they promote their patriotism over their Christianity. And so I want to deal with this from a biblical perspective. In other words, as Christians, because the lines have been so blurred, so muddy, we don't know where one leaves off and the other begins. In other words, is it American to be Christian? Is it Christian to be American? We don't know. And if you look at the current climate with what's going on in the political arena, the lines are drawn not along values, which at one point, our conservative Christians said, vote your values. But we're not voting along values, but culture. And even among culture, that's even divided. So now it's ideology, it's political ideology. And so Christians have so muddied the water that now our culture is no longer looking to us as the answer. They're no longer looking to us as the example of morality, of right and wrong. But what does God has to say? Now, I want to read something in Romans chapter 13. And this is sort of the go-to-all scripture for today's American patriotism. Romans chapter 13 and verse 1, this is Paul writing. He says, everyone must submit to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist are instituted by God. So then the one who resists the authority is opposing God's command, and those who oppose it will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have its approval. The government is God's servant for your good. And if you do wrong, be afraid, because it does not carry the sword in vain. The government is God's servant, an avenger that brings wrath on those who does wrong. Therefore, you must submit, not only because of wrath, but also because of your conscience. And note that term conscience, we'll come back to it later. And for this reason, you must pay taxes, since the authorities are God's public servants, continually attending to these tasks. Pay your obligations to everyone. Taxes to those you owe taxes, tolls to those you owe tolls, respect to those you owe respect, and honor to those you owe honor. Now, you should keep in mind that Paul is writing this passage of scripture during the Roman Empire time. And soon they would be ramping up a persecution against Christians. The bigger question is, why is Paul writing this passage of scripture? And why does he tell us to submit to the governing authorities? Now we're going to come back to that. There's something I want to read. I'm going to go to 1 Peter, because Peter, of course, and this is interesting about Peter, he was, remember, one of the original 12 apostles. That's going to come important when we, in a moment. So in 1 Peter chapter 2 and then verse 9. Now remember I asked a question about Romans. I said, well, why is Paul telling Christians to submit? Now, by the way, this is quite different than American patriotism and the purpose of why a government will tell its citizens to submit. Why is Paul telling us? Because remember, during this time, Christians again faced a hostile government. Christianity was relatively new on the scene. A lot of people haven't even heard of Christianity at this time. And so when Paul says submit, again, why is he saying this? And Paul's theme for saying a lot of things in his teachings, by the way, all have the same reasons. And it comes with the title of this series, We Are God's Models. Let's give them something to see. Now you're going to understand how I'm connecting all of this as we move on. Again, we ask the question, why is Paul writing this? Now, Paul is not writing this instructing them to be good Romans. And by the way, if you go down to verse 8, he goes on and says, do not owe anyone anything except to love one another, for the one who loves another fulfills the law. Now he goes on, we're not going to get into that, but notice he says, do not owe anyone. In other words, so who is owed? In context, if you came across a Roman official, a government official, give them the proper respect. He says nothing wrong with that. That if you have to pay taxes and you pay your taxes, nothing wrong with that. Okay? But the bigger issue is, why is he telling Christians to do that? And let me also add that he is not saying that your allegiance is to this government, because if that was the case, the government was calling upon Christians to renounce their faith in the persecution. So now, when you have a situation where the government is calling upon its citizens to renounce their faith, who do you obey? So obviously you're going to obey God. They did, the Christians did. And many of them were jailed, tortured, and even martyred or murdered for their faith. So we come back to the question again. Why is Paul instructing Christians to submit to the government? Now, in some respects, we need to understand how we got here. When I say here, when we talk about the American Christianity, and then how it comes down to the different conservative movements, okay? And in some respect, this has been going on for a couple of millennia. Now think about this. We just read where Paul said to submit to the government. Now during this time, Christianity was again growing. It was new. I'm also say it was kind of pure. And the reason why, it had its growing pains, but it was also pure because they were constantly establishing themselves. They were also being persecuted. Now, one of the things that happened in about the 3rd century was the Emperor Constantine had a conversion. I'm not going to debate whether or not, if it was real or not. Some people can test that. But what happened, what he did do was, what happened, when he converted to Christianity, he also declared the Roman Empire as Christian. Everybody was a Christian now. And that was good and it was bad. The good thing is, there were Christians who were in jail. There were Christians who were being persecuted. That stopped. Christians became the darlings of the empire. Pastors were giving land to build churches. They were tax exempt. Okay, that was the good part. The bad part was everybody was a Christian, whether you had a true conversion or not. And this was the first time where you had the marriage of Christianity and state. They were married together. The problem is that now Christianity was polluted with paganism, because priests who were under pagan priests in the Roman were now Christians, because everybody was a Christian in this time. Okay? That persisted on down through all of these centuries, even to the present day. where it's hard to tell who's a Christian and who's not a Christian. Even, I can tell you in my lifetime, if you ask a person, are they a Christian? They would have responded, I'm an American. That mentality, the seeds go all the way back to this time when Constantine married Christianity and thus polluted the purity of Christianity. I'm going to go further of this in the next video. Okay, I'll see you then.